Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar about safe return to workplaces. My name's Anna from the TEC, and I'm joined today by Sarah Evans, Doug Russell and Chris Stiles. I'll be talking a little bit more about them in a second, but just a bit of our usual housekeeping about the webinars before we get going properly. As ever, we've got live captions on this webinar, so if you click the green button at the bottom of the screen that says Open Live Transcript, you'll be able to follow the captions as we're speaking. We would like you to post some questions to our speakers. So there's an Ask a Question button again at the bottom of the screen. Please post questions that you've got there. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can after our speakers have made their presentations. But if we don't get to them all, don't worry, because we will take them all on board when we're designing guidance for workplace reps. There's a chat panel on the right hand side, and it's great to see so many of you already introducing yourselves in there. It's fabulous to see such a big range of places and unions today. I've noticed that while we were before we went live. So just a quick word about the subject of today. So we're at a time in the COVID-19 pandemic where we're starting to see changes to the way we're living and working, mainly non-essential shops and hospitality. The timing and regulations around these are a bit different across all 4 nations of the UK. So while we might be talking about something that's happened in one country but not in another, it might be happening over the coming weeks there. And my colleagues are going to post some links in the chat panel to the guidance for all 4 nations if you wanted to check any of those specifics. However, wherever these changes take place, employers do have a responsibility to keep their workers safe. So today we're going to hear from Sarah Evans, who's a PCS rep from the DVLA, and she's going to talk about the strike action about safety at the DVLA that we've some of you might have heard quite a lot about. We've got Doug Russell, who's a health and safety officer from Usdaw. He's going to talk about practical steps that health and safety reps need to do to get their employers to make things safe, including things like face coverings and ventilation. And then we're going to have Chris Stiles, who's a Unite organiser. He's got some tips on organising remotely and face-to-face, and things that reps can do to apply pressure to employers to ensure they are making things safe at work. So enough from me for now. I'm going to hand over to Sarah to tell us about the strike action that's been happening at the DVLA. Sarah, over to you.
Hi, thanks Anna, and thank you very much for having me along to speak today. I think it's probably safe to say that almost everybody has heard at least a little of what's been going on in the DVLA. 12 months ago, we were in a much better position. The agency worked with us very quickly. We got numbers on site reduced from 4,500 to 5,000 down to around 400 very, very quickly after lockdown. And during the next few months, we worked with the agency to get things put into place to allow staff to start returning slowly, which all worked well until September hit. And come September, we saw a mass return. They wanted everybody who'd been home back in. And this is when the measures put in place that worked well for a few hundred broke down when it came to applying them to a few thousand. And we started seeing positive cases within the agency. We had the first one on the 7th of September, and fast forward to now, we've got 614 positive cases that have happened in that time. Round about November, we started to see a very specific cluster of cases happen in our contact centre. And we were meeting with management, myself and my full-time officer from PCS, saying, you need to act, something needs to be done. No, it's not our fault, we're doing everything we can. It's the staff, they're young, they're going out, they're socialising, and they put it down to that. And then mid-December, we had an outbreak declared, and we saw over 70 cases within 2 weeks in a contact centre. And this is a building that had just around about 500 staff in it. So it was spreading like wildfire. The DVLA still refused to move on numbers. The only concession they gave was they would close the contact centre for 4 days in between Christmas and New Year. So back in January, when staff returned from Christmas, we started to see positive cases again. And this is when we then formally went into dispute with them, because whilst they were saying they were a COVID secure building and they had done all the health and safety changes that they need to, something wasn't working. So we started quite intense negotiations to try and reduce numbers further, because we knew that's how we could keep our members safe. The DVLA had none of it. So we then decided we had no choice. You know, we had a death of a member of staff, yet the DVLA would not acknowledge what they would do, and they wouldn't acknowledge any part that they had to play in these cases. And it was the ballot, I think, where nobody expected us to win. And I hold my hands up and say, I didn't think we'd meet the turnout threshold. I knew we'd get the relevant percentage of people voting to strike, but I didn't think we'd get that 50% turnout, because in recent years, we've never been able to achieve that. And I think the DVLA felt the same. If people aren't going to vote for pay, when that affects everyone, why are only 2,000 odd members of staff in work going to vote for things that don't affect them? Because we did have a 50-50 split of staff at home. And that's where the shock came when we did win that ballot, and we thought, right, now they're going to take our health and safety concerns seriously. They're going to negotiate with us. They're going to get to reduce numbers, get more staff working from home, and let's start from a safe place. We're not saying we want the place shut down. We want staff at home doing anything. We want a safe starting point to work together again, to build up the things that we can do while safely increasing numbers on site. But the management of the DVLA have been so incredibly hostile, and they seem disingenuous. They've been very, I suppose we could say, imaginative with their figures and things. They were called in front of a Transport Select Committee, and that was an absolute car crash for them. They didn't know their figures. They admitted the CEO had been on site 6 times in the last 12 months. Well, if you were telling your staff that your site is safe, why aren't you there as well then? Why is it safe for them, but not safe for you? They've advertised for a grade 7 post recently, and the post actually states, until it is safe to do so, you will be working from home. So again, it's perfectly safe for the AAs and the AOs, the lower grades amongst us, not safe for senior management. But the health and safety failings that they've had have just been unreal. We all know social distancing guidelines are a minimum of 2 metres. The DVLA have always said, yes, we've got that right. We were pushing them and saying, our members are telling us they are not 2 metres apart. Wouldn't acknowledge that. No, everything was fine. During a health and safety inspection by Environmental Health, we actually spoke to them 24 hours before their inspection and explained to them the DVLA are not listening to our concerns, but not all desks are safe. And then within the space of 2 weeks, a further 331 desks had to be removed from site for breaking social distancing guidelines. Desks that we had been told since August were 2 metres apart and was safe for staff to sit at up to 8 hours a day. We've got no breakout areas open, nowhere we can go to eat our lunch or take a break. We're at these desks 2 metres, less than 2 metres apart. But we are threatened with disciplinary action if we don't adhere to social distancing in the workplace. You just couldn't make it up. So we weren't getting anywhere. We served them with a desired 2 weeks notice of a strike ballot, and I think ignorance came into play again with the DVLA. They didn't expect our members to strike, but boy did they strike. About 1,400 members came out on strike of the 2,300 that are on site at any one time. And, we thought the members have shown the management now just how much they care about their own health and safety, because they have to take it on themselves. The management aren't doing anything with it. And so we thought this is now going to be the turning point where DVLA start to take us seriously, and they haven't. We're still at a point now where we are trying to negotiate a reduction in numbers. DVLA are trying to increase numbers. They want to bring back all the vulnerable staff by the 17th of May. We've had to now serve notice of another 4 days of industrial action, and that's going to be taking place from the 4th of May if no agreement is reached in the meantime. And I know there's a lot of different unions on here today, so it's my opportunity to say thank you because the messages of support and the donations to our fighting fund have come in from all across the country and across every trade union movement. And we share all these with our Facebook group and on the PCS website, and it really does spur members on to let them know that they're not doing this in vain. You know, people in similar situations, but perhaps on a smaller scale, are now looking at us and how we are challenging an employer who cannot be held responsible for our health and safety because they won't do anything about it. And we are stepping up and saying to them, that's not good enough. You're our employer, you know, you have to take our health and safety seriously. So from me to everyone with the messages of support and things, just thank you very, very much. And I can't stay around to answer any questions, unfortunately. I've got about another 5-10 minutes and I'll answer what I can. But if anybody wants to just drop me an email or drop Anna or Alice some emails with questions and things, or even messages of support, they'll all be greatly received, and I will reply to anything and everything that we get. So thank you, Anna.
That's brilliant, Sarah. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. You can see Chris and Doug there applauding. So I don't know whether you've seen in the chat panel, lots of people have been posting solidarity messages. They've been sort of zooming by while you've been speaking, and we've just posted the link to the PCS Strike Fund to support members who are working at the DVLA. And Sarah's email address has been posted as well. As she said, you can email her. I'm just, because you have to go in a minute, Sarah, let me just see if any questions have come that are specific to you rather than saving them for Doug and Chris. Just 1 second, please bear with me, everyone. There's none just yet, but before you go, I'm just going to see if either Doug or Chris have got something they want to add, because you've got about five minutes, maybe 4 or 5 minutes. Let me just go to Chris first and see if there's anything he wants to add or ask you before you go, because I do want to use all your time, all the time that you can give us. So Chris, anything you wanted to add or ask Sarah?
Yes, I think for me, the question would be number one, what can we? Is there anything specifically the other unions can do to support, and anything you need from us? And then just to say, what a fantastic presentation, and obviously good. Best of luck with it, and I'm sure you're going to win. And then just sort of finally, in terms of like the decision makers involved, I wondered if there was any sort of supportive actions again, on the other unions question. Maybe there's other places where we can have some obviously socially distanced events, if you like, whereby we can put some pressure on those decision makers as well as to assist your strike.
Thank you, Chris. I think the decision makers at the minute seem to be more at a DFT level with the senior management there. Interestingly, they have removed our own CEO from the negotiations. So, I find that very interesting. I do feel maybe she's going to be the scapegoat at some point, but that's not going to be an unwelcomed move, because she's been very smug and arrogant through everything, even when we're discussing the death of a colleague who was a vulnerable man who scored at least a 4 on a risk assessment and potentially sat less than 2 meters apart from the person next to him. They're smug at that. She's lost all respect, not just from us as a union, but from the majority of staff as well. But as for support, the messages of support have been fantastic. And if they can just keep on coming, because we want our members to know that it wasn't a case of we hit them hard in 4 days and then that's it, it's forgotten, which is why as many of us across PCS as possible do raise the issues with the DVLA, because we know these are going to be the same sort of issues that other businesses and other parts of the civil service could face. It just seems to be at the minute, the DVLA is unique in the fact that we seem to be very prehistoric in our systems. We can't have staff working from home. And they've always said that's because the information that we hold is part of the critical national infrastructure, because one of our systems has a record of every single driving licence in the UK. But we've always questioned this and think, HMRC can do it, banks can do it, DWP can do it, everywhere else does it, but not us. And about 3 weeks ago during a meeting, they finally confirmed what we'd been saying all along. And that was one of the reasons why operational staff are not working at home, is because there's no supervision of them when they're accessing these systems. And that's what we've been saying all along. It's not that we can't work from home, it's you don't trust us to work from home. And that would be, a simple solution, not just for staff. It would keep us safe. It would also better serve our customers as well, because we could have more staff at home doing more work. And staff at home will typically work longer hours than those in work. Even though they shouldn't, you'll find that perhaps you won't take your full lunch break, or you'll work through your morning break and things like that. So by being so old-fashioned in their ways, they're damaging themselves more than anything, because they've got staff that are willing to work and want to work.
Yeah, absolutely, Sarah. A couple of questions have just appeared. You've alluded already a little bit to this about the DVLA are saying about the lack of people aren't supervised at home. What other reasons did they offer in a defence for their actions? I mean, obviously it's not defensible, but we've had people asking, what did they say?
Yeah, they're saying that they're COVID secure because they've got banners to prove it. As long as the banners are in place, then we're a COVID secure workplace. How they can say that when there's been 614 positive cases, I don't know, but they keep referring to that. And they also keep throwing it back a lot in a way of, well, everything was fine in August, what has changed? And the CEO has asked me that question many times. And my answer to her has always been the same. If she asked me today, it would be 614 things have changed. And that's the 614 positive cases. In August, we didn't have a single case because our numbers on site were low. Come September, when they start, and it was like a snowball. Once they started, they couldn't stop them. And that has been pretty much their excuse. We're COVID secure and we have complied with Public Health Wales and Environmental Health. And that's their answer to us.
Have they done any risk assessments with staff, with individuals?
Yes. So we did really push them further with the risk assessments in January to get people reassessed. And that was a battle, but we did manage to get over 300 staff sent home who scored a 4 or more. So to get to a score of 4, you've got to have some pretty serious health conditions. And these people were in work and doing that. That didn't come easy. We had to battle to get them to do it. Then we had to battle with individual managers who were telling their staff, no, your asthma is not chronic because you haven't had a pump for it, or you haven't been admitted to hospital in the last 12 months. To have to go and explain to managers what the definition of a chronic health condition is was just unreal. And these managers who've got no medical training at all, playing with people's lives, refusing to send people home. And if the people didn't come to us to say, I think I should be home, we wouldn't know about it. And I've got no doubt there's people in work at the minute who are still a high risk that should not be there.
Absolutely. One of our viewers has made a really great suggestion, actually. They've said that rather than calling it COVID secure, because that, arguable whether anything can be COVID secure, yeah, they're suggesting it should be COVID assessed, which perhaps isn't a bad suggestion. Let's see what we can do about that. Sarah, I'm aware you've got to leave us probably in the next minute to do the school run, but you've been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us today. To avoid you having to stop mid-sentence or go on too long, feel free to stay on for the next bit, but I know you do have to go in a minute, so thank you so much. And we'll post the information about the PCS strike fund in the chat again and send it out to everyone. So that's all from Sarah for now, but now I'm going to hand over to Doug Russell, who is the Health and Safety Officer from Usdaw. So Doug, can you talk a little bit about your experience of the past year and some of the practical things that safety reps can do or get their employers to do to make things safer, please? Over to you, Doug.
Thanks, Anna. Like all the other unions, we've got loads of information and advice for our reps and members up on our website, and you'll see the link to some of that stuff in the chat fairly soon. We've got a lot of members who are key workers in retail, distribution and food manufacturing who had to continue to work all the way through and face a lot of the challenges on a day-to-day basis because of that. And we've learned a lot of valuable lessons from that experience and the negotiations with employers about introducing safe systems of work into those kind of workplaces, which means we're in quite a good place, really, now that the return to work is happening and non-essential shops are opening up and gradually more and more other places will be opening up as well. We've learned some very valuable lessons about what needs to be done and the messaging that needs to be gone across to people to actually try to make sure that they stay as safe as possible. And if anyone wants a good summary of what I'm about to say, apart from what their own union is producing in terms of guidance for safety reps, the TUC has just recently issued a report on safe return to work, which is an excellent report and actually summarises a lot of the main issues and deals with them in a lot more depth than I'll have time in the 10 minutes I've got. But the key message really is it's not all over yet. We're not out of the pandemic. We've still got a long way to go before we're definitely in the clear as far as the pandemic is concerned. And I say that because people tend to think very often when you start to see partial relaxation of some of the controls that are in place, that it's all right and they can just forget about all the other precautions. And particularly with the vaccination program rolling out, people are thinking that, well, I've been vaccinated, so in a few weeks I'm going to be fine, I can do whatever I want and I'll be perfectly safe. And as the vaccination spread, hopefully does continue to spread throughout the rest of the population, that kind of false feeling of confidence is going to be a very difficult thing to try and manage. Because even if the vaccination is as successful as it looks like it's going to be, about half of the adult population still hasn't even received their first jab, and the majority of them haven't received their second injection yet. And even if it does work, it's not going to be a completely 100% cure for the virus. The best estimates are that something about 80% of people will be protected. So 1 in 5 people will still be able to catch the virus, still be able to pass it on to other people. The good news is that the vaccines hopefully will still mean that they don't get the serious health complications that have arisen, or are not as likely to get those serious health complications, but some still will. There will still be hospitalizations and there still will be deaths. It's not going away in that respect. So vaccinations are crucially important, and we need to encourage people to be vaccinated as much as possible, but on their own, they're not going to actually deal with the problem. And the other sorts of precautions, the sort of stuff that Sarah was describing that the PCS were demanding at DVLA, are going to be crucially important for months yet to come if we're going to actually protect workers in the workplaces. One of the key ones of those things that are crucially important is workplace testing. Something like a third of the people who are infectious are asymptomatic and don't show no signs of infection at all. Lateral flow testing, which is now being rolled out quite widely, and employers are being encouraged to do it, does detect quite a few of those people who are positive and don't know that they're positive. Not all of them, but quite a few of them. It's not a particularly accurate test. It needs to be treated with some caution. But if you do find people who are positive on a lateral flow test, they can almost get a confirmatory PCR test, which is more sensitive to confirm things. But the key thing is you can identify some of the people who would otherwise be causing a risk to other people in the workplace. And provided you've got systems in place to make sure that they can self-isolate and remove themselves from the workplace, that will help to control the spread of the infection again. But that's the key point, is that they have to be able to self-isolate, and part of the problem is that all that they're legally entitled to is statutory sick pay, and we all know that's not sufficient. So we need to actually make sure that employers have got systems in place to encourage people so they can self-isolate when they have to. Things like hand hygiene and cleaning surfaces that people share and touch a lot is still going to be important, but it's not the most important and most significant part of the process when it comes to controlling the spread of the COVID virus. One of the things we've learned over the last 12 months is that actually the airborne route is actually probably the most important route for spreading of the infection. Whether that's the airborne route in close contact, where people are actually getting large droplets that people are expelling from their mouth when they sneeze or cough, or even when they just talk loudly to each other. And that lands on your skin and gets into your eyes or into your mouth, and then you get the infection. Or whether it's because if you're working in an enclosed space with lots of other people over a period of time, the level of virus in the general circulating air builds up in an aerosol form, and that can be inhaled as well. Those are both very, very important aspects of it. So things like social distancing, barriers and screens between workers and the public in areas where you're actually dealing with customers or clients, wearing of face coverings in workplaces where there's large numbers of people moving about. They're all still going to be important control measures that we're still going to have to use for some time yet, until we hopefully see the effects of the vaccine in damping down the levels of infection in a few months' time. Crucially important is ventilation, and that's one of the lessons that we've learned. I mean, sadly, the problem is that ventilation is important in all workplaces for all sorts of reasons, apart from COVID as well. If you've got poor ventilation in an office like the DVLA offices in Swansea, for example, I can guarantee by the end of the working day, those people who are in those offices are probably finding it hard to concentrate. They got headaches, the air was so stuffy they couldn't breathe, and there was problems with it. And in that, if you've got that kind of poor ventilation and you've got the build-up of the virus in that sort of environment as well, it's going to spread. There's going to be a problem with it as well. So making sure you get fresh air into workplaces is crucially important. For most of our members in the big supermarkets, that's not been an issue because large supermarkets have got big high ceilings, they've got lots of doors that are open all the time, there's people going in and out, so there's generally good air exchange and airflow. But even in those places, there are going to be places like storerooms, staff rooms, offices at the back that are perhaps a bit more pokey and a bit more enclosed where people might end up spending more time. And it's important they're identified by risk assessments. We've got large numbers of members who work in food manufacturing where ventilation isn't an option because they can't actually bring too much fresh air in from outside for food hygiene reasons. They want to actually control the air that's in there. So they're recirculating the air all the time. And in those sorts of situations, they're being forced to look at introducing air filtering processes, whether it's through a physical filter or it's using ultraviolet light to sterilize the air to keep the bacteria and virus levels down as a way of trying to control it. But all those sorts of things need to be considered in all workplaces to make sure there's a good supply of clean air for people to breathe if we're going to actually control this particular infection. I wanted to just say a little bit about the face coverings issue, because again, it's one of the things that has caused some confusion in some places. The point about face coverings is that it's a public health measure which is designed to prevent or restrict the spread of the virus, because what it does, it means if you're wearing a face covering and you happen to be infectious, it traps any droplets that you might exhale and breathe out when you're going about and stops them from spreading to others. So that's the primary function of most of the face coverings that most of us have to wear. They don't provide very much protection about what you're breathing in. And certainly a lot of those aerosol particles that you're breathing are fine enough to actually get past most of the cloth face coverings that most of us wear, particularly when lots of people don't wear them properly and have their nose sticking out over the top and things like that. So they're a public health measure. They're not a workplace personal protective equipment in the sense that's meant by the personal protective equipment regulations. HSE are very clear about that, and it's important to bear that distinction in mind. They're still an important public health measure to use in workplaces where there's lots of people mixing and mingling together, because workplaces, it's a bit like when they introduced smoking bans in public spaces. Workplaces were public spaces where they introduced the ban of smoking because you don't want people breathing other people's cigarettes smoke. In the same way, you don't want people breathing other people's virus if they've actually got it. But there will be some circumstances where workers actually do need proper protective equipment. They actually need respirators to protect them against the virus, because there's a higher dose of the virus and there's more chance of them breathing it in. Not so much for our members, apart from, funnily enough, funeral undertakers. When they're doing things like embalming, there's a risk there, and their employers are providing them with what are called FFP3 respirators to wear when they're doing that kind of work, because there's a danger of an aerosol being produced that could be inhaled when they're working there. And there'll be other sectors where that kind of protection is going to be necessary. In healthcare and social care particularly, it's very important to look at that. Those are all the sorts of measures that are needed in place on top of the vaccination programme rolling out. Key to all of that is that risk assessment that the employers should be doing. And again, the TUC research shows not enough is being done in risk assessment by lots of employers. They need to share that risk assessment with safety reps where safety reps are organised, and they need to listen to what the reps are telling them about what the members are finding in their workplaces. There's going to be an interesting challenge for safety reps as they return to what happens, which Chris is going to pick up on, I hope, which is all about how you actually do organise in those circumstances and get that contact with your members and get the feedback from the members when there's going to be less face-to-face contact because of the circumstances you're working in, and ways around that are going to be pretty important. I wanted to finish with one other particular issue which affects workers who are in contact with the public, and that is this problem that lots of people do think that because there's been some relaxation of the rules, all the rules have gone and they can do what they like and walk into workplaces where people are trying to protect themselves without taking any other precautions. That means there's a need for workers in shops, on public transport, in lots of office buildings where there's customers or clients going into them, to remind people all the time of the need to actually still practice social distancing, wear face coverings and so on. And that's a trigger point we found for verbal abuse and even physical aggression upon occasion. I don't have time to go into the detail of it, but in our most recent survey of violence to staff in retail, shockingly, we found more than doubling of the incidence of violence to staff as a result of them having to remind people about precautions under COVID. And something like nearly 1 in 10 shop workers has been physically assaulted in the last year just because they're trying to remind people of the rules and they need to follow them. So there's a particular issue there, a risk that again needs to be managed and dealt with by employers as best they can to protect their staff. All of that means there's a lot of stuff needs to be done on top of the vaccination program. We're not out of the woods yet, as I said. I don't intend that to sound negative, though, because we do know the precautions that need to be taken, and we know the precautions that work. And provided we can put those precautions in place, and provided we can actually do it safely, then we can actually open up workplaces again, get people back into jobs, and actually return to some kind of normality, provided it's done well and safely. So the safety reps have a crucial role to play in that process.
Thanks so much, Doug. And I think that final point you made there, we can do this. We've just got to think about how we do it and make sure it's employers are held to account, and the safety reps role is crucial there. We have had quite a lot of questions that relate to things you said, but I want to give Chris a chance to speak first, just to remind our viewers that a lot of links are appearing in the chat of resources, TUC and otherwise. Don't worry if you don't catch them all. We'll make sure we email them out to everyone who's registered for the webinar. Right, so Chris, over to you. Can you tell us a little bit more about the opportunities for both face-to-face and online organising that reps can do with members at the moment?
Yes, thank you. So I work for Unite's National Organising and Leverage Department. That's headed up by Sharon Graham. She's the Executive Officer for Organising. And essentially, there'll be some tools posted in the chat, a website with our tools will be posted into the chat in a minute, which will show you a bit more, some templates in order for everyone to be able to use. And this is for everyone to be able to use. There's some password protected areas for Unite reps only, but there's a vast sort of array of tools for you to be able to utilize in there. So we effectively organize, just really quickly, just a little introduction, organize in terms of the top 10 in each of sectors. We're a general union. So essentially what we have is the top 10 which Sharon puts together from each sector. And obviously the idea is to ensure that we've got strength, union power in those top 10, and obviously then to filter right the way down through that list and beyond the 10. Ideally, that means then, essentially we have to get into the supply chain of each one of those, those top 10 in that sector. And we, and the idea is that then if we get strength and control across the sector, then we are in a good position, to be able to bargain. Now, where that fits in terms of the pandemic specifically is that we apply, that the organising model has to be applied, wherever we are with regards to any issue. And specifically within the pandemic, we found, just as an example, key workers in food, in the food processing factories have had issues with Perspex screens, for example, not being put in. They've run out of hand sanitizer, believe it or not, in the very early days when it all started. And obviously, the food industry had about sort of 10 Christmases all at once in terms of the turnover. Because it was the only place you could go and spend any money during the first sort of part of the pandemic, and so therefore our members have felt the knock-on effects of that. So it was absolutely massively important that we got in there, and again, you've got to treat everything in the same way. It's all an organising issue. There's no point. Obviously, we have to raise the issue with the bosses, but if the bosses are concerned about getting the production through, they're going to be less concerned unless we make it their issue. In terms of the safety issues that our members faced. So what we did very early doors is we started to utilize. We got like a block texting system, which is very easy to get if you don't have one already. If your branch can fork out for it itself, or your unions have probably got one like ours has internally. And on within the block texts, you can create surveys. You've got many different providers. So there's SurveyMonkey, Google Forms is another. You can get them made, you get them turned into a link, and you can get them out to all your members. The key to it all is where you might have been handing out the survey before, and you might not want to be handing out the survey now physically. You can get that spread on the text messages, you can get that email to everyone, and you can get that into people quick. And at the same time, you can do everything, as long as it's, safe in terms of COVID, and you observe the precautions, you can still do that physically in areas where you can see each other. Importantly, you want to get the message out quick, use the online versions, and also if you've got workers that are, working from home, which obviously in the food industry it wasn't so much, but finance as another example is where we've got workers that are all spread out now and don't see each other every day anymore. Then we utilised the Survey Monkey in order to get to them to ask specific questions on the issue of whether it's the return to work, whether it's the issue with the hand sanitizer in the factory, in order to build a collective voice around the specific issue that workers were affected by. The importance in that as well is that we're not just asking members to fill in the survey to then put pressure on the boss to change the issue. We're spreading that to non-members, and the way in which we did that was we utilised. WhatsApp's the one that lots of people have nowadays. There's many different different versions available as well. But or there's Facebook groups where you have like little chat groups where you've got workers that know each other and they can be stood next to each other in work. Or they could be, working from home. But the point is, they're all chatting to each other in those groups. And if we get the links that we get, to the surveys, to the petitions, which we can create through those survey tools, those online survey tools, get them floated into all of those groups, then and asking everyone to fill the thing in. As per normal, we would be identifying leaders, and we'd have reps where we've got reps targeted with getting everyone to fill the form in and reminding them to fill it in, so that we can build a strong case. Then we find that suddenly within the space of a couple of days, we've got overwhelmingly lots of people taking part in those collective actions. That then adds the pressure very quickly onto the bosses to have to change something. So it's not a case of, so whereas it might have been a priority before, sort of halfway up the list, it's now a top priority because we want a meeting about the fact that 200 people in the factory or in that X workplace has just signed a petition, and this could turn into something. This could escalate. The idea of that as well is that obviously we become strike ready. That's not to say that we go out on strike left, right and centre every day of the week, but what it means is it sends a very clear message that if we collectivise on the back of that issue, however small it is, if we collectivise and we get that turnaround quick and we get all members supporting it, first of all and foremost, it makes members and non-members who then start joining the union feel a part of the movement, a part of the change, because it's all about strength in numbers. And secondly, it means that we can, that we can make sure that we got the details, the names and addresses correct, because obviously we can always also ask those questions on the survey as well, or on the petition that we push out on the back of the issue. We get all that correct in order that we can then become ballot ready and ready for, and like I say, the employer will sense that then in terms of, prioritising those issues. As well. Just in general, we've seen a massive. We've put on minimum of like 1,000 members per sector out of the 21 sectors across the UK during the pandemic, and we've seen some major growth in some of the key worker industries as well, like with food, as a result of organising remotely. The key as well to having to getting to utilising the tools that I've sent to you that are in the link, and also then the online survey tools, is all of that information from that one link. Make your survey, write your questions, give it to your union officer if you're not very up with making it yourself online. Give it to your rep that likes working on the computers. Once you've made those, once you've written those questions out and just stuck them in, and it's very easy to use. You are then able to download all the responses into like one grid. So you can very quickly mark down who's a member, who's not a member, compare that to your membership list. And then you suddenly find that a lot of non-members may well have taken part. And the next question to them is from your reps, from those leaders you've identified in those different areas, is to go and ask them to get their name on the form in order that, to make us strong. Because next week we've got or tomorrow we've got a meeting with a boss about this issue that we want to win on. And by and large, once that sort of swarm takes place in the workplace, you will get the employer moving. Obviously, you need to become ballot ready, because round the corner, of course, is where some of these employers might well have been claiming that they were claiming poverty before, and they've just had 10 Christmases in a row, and all the production's going haywire in the factory. You might have your pay round coming up, and obviously, you need to build in order to get strong at the negotiating table for that. That all starts off with those collective issues on the back of, obviously in this instance, the pandemic, or those health and safety issues, and that will build you into good shape, ready to get around the negotiating table with the employer for any one of your issues. We've also got in our union, and I'm sure there's some in others as well, we've got the pay claim generator, which again for general being able to run pay claims, which is obviously, again, it's all about building collective action and building strength to get to that position where you can go in and in a strong position to issue your pay claim. And you'll find that within the tools as well, there's like a step-by-step guide on how to campaign around pay, how to campaign around any one of your issues in the workplace. But obviously, the key right from the outset, at the start of the pandemic to now, has been it's been health and safety issues. Right the way, like I say, from silly, essential things that you think that they would have provided for, like hand sanitizer, right the way through to obviously, employers, as I said, using this as an excuse. And just to finish, what we also have in our union is a strategy, and hence, as I said at the start, I work for the organising and leverage department. We have a leverage strategy as well, and where we have to, when employers take opportunistic steps to exploit our members, as British Airways did last summer, we have a leverage strategy as well, which enabled us to push back and stop the fire and rehire British Airways as a result of them taking advantage of the pandemic. So just on that point, I think that's me, and obviously happy to receive any questions.
Thanks so much, Chris. You covered a huge amount there, and I think what was really helpful, obviously, was the tools that are available on your website that people can look up, but also the practical tips that you suggested, like make the most of your rep team. If you've got someone who's good at computers, get them putting the newsletter together, that sort of thing. I think we forget sometimes that share the workload. Find someone who likes doing that, and they're going to do a better job of it. Right, let's take a look at some of the questions we've had in. Doug, we've got one for you first. One of our viewers has said that the safe return to work isn't just about physical safety, but also mental health and safety too. Do you think we should be encouraging employers to recognise the mental health challenges that returning to workplaces may have? This could be for a variety of different reasons. And if so, what should some of the steps be that allow people to transition to come back? Have you got any thoughts on that, please?
It's a very important point. Yeah, the mental health issues around the pandemic are just beginning to come out, really, and they're quite serious. There are two issues there. One is that people are still working at home, because where you can still work at home, you should still be working at home. And also in lots of industries, in call centres, for example, where we've organised, the employers have found that actually it's a lot cheaper for them running without an office, and they're moving towards more like permanent home working arrangements, which means there's all sorts of issues around how you deal with the isolation for home workers, which is quite a difficult one to deal with. One of the biggest mental health problems, undoubtedly, about the return, though, is the anxiety factor. Having to get on public transport to get to work, coming back into an office where there's lots of other people moving around and the numbers building up and again. And we've had lots of members who've had serious issues with anxiety that needs to be dealt with. And at times that can actually develop into more serious mental health problems as well. And I think there definitely is a role there for the mental health campaigns that unions have been running over the last couple of years, like the one that we have. A lot of the employers have looked at mental health first aiders as a way of actually having people in the workplace who can be a place where people can go to get advice and be signposted for all that kind of thing. But fundamentally, it also requires the employers to think about ways in which they can actually handle that situation as well, and give some space to people to actually overcome some of those problems by adjusting hours, or by giving them jobs that don't involve direct contact with the public if they're really, really scared about it, and things of that kind as well.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Doug. That's really helpful. I've got a question for you now, Chris. Just one moment. It's just disappeared. Here we go. So, do you have any advice for organising a picket safely and legally, bearing in mind everything that's going on at the moment?
Yeah, so I think the main thing to do is to ensure that obviously everyone is safe, first and foremost. That's the reps, the members, the employees of the union. And obviously just ensure, I think, that you've got one person in particular who's good at this, that is allotted to making sure that everyone's got a face mask, that the sanitizer is there's a station to sanitize, and that obviously we're observing the picket rules in general on that front. Now, obviously things are different now to what they were about sort of 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago or so. I've been given slightly different advice then, but again, the main thing is just have someone allotted to that, give them that job, a bit like the Survey Monkey thing. You don't have to do all that yourself and think, I've got a load of extra jobs to do now. Give that to someone to do that will be able to handle that. And then, and obviously just run it by your union officer as well, to make sure that they, that they're happy with the kind of, the plan for the day. Just an A4, 3 or 4, 5 or 6, 7 or 8 bullet points, all on one piece of A4. Make sure that's stuck to. The key as well with, if you have to, obviously you're observing the Picket rules, but what we've done previously is you can have like an event, if you like, where again we observe the COVID rules and ensure that everyone's safe. But you can do that just down the road away from the actual sort of picket line to ensure that you get maximum effect for when you get your cameras out. And when you do your press release for the press to be able to have more of an interest in it because there's some sort of an event going on, or you're all, you've got more workers there, or activists there, again, socially distanced and safe, but holding up the banners, if just in case you want to get more to turn up, but you want to make sure you're within the rules. So I think that the last thing to say on that is just to make sure you get the photos right. One person should be allotted to speaking to the police if they come, and just being able to sort of to explain to them that everything's safe and everything's within the rules. And secondly, someone should be allotted to making sure they get the photos done. So and they're feeding all of those back into whoever's doing your Twitter or your Facebook, and importantly, getting that out to the newspapers on the day when it's happened. Which ideally you'll have a press release from your officer, from your press department. So just give the jobs out, make sure everyone's briefed, and obviously you've got it double checked over with an official that that you're within all the rules.
That's excellent advice there, Chris. Thanks, and really practical tips. We've had quite a few questions about ventilation, specifically with regard to risk assessments. This is obviously quite a hot topic. So, Doug, rather than answer the questions individually, could you talk a little bit, in general, about ventilation risk assessments, maybe any tools or devices that you might recommend, and particularly whether anything should be done about measuring recirculated air and the levels of that. If you've got any information about that, that would be really helpful.
It's all very technical stuff, I'm afraid, Anna. It gets quite difficult when you get into that level of detail. There is good guidance. If you go to the HSE's website, the coronavirus web pages, there's a section on ventilation, and it gives you a link to an organisation called SIBSE, which is the British civil engineers organisation, and they've got some very good technical advice on this sort of stuff. And there's also a European equivalent of SIBSE, which has got a website, which has got some good advice in its website as well. The simplest thing in ventilation terms in lots of buildings is just to make sure that you can open windows and doors. And in the summer, that's fine. In the winter, that can be more of a problem because they've got a minimum temperature requirement to reach as well. But lots of organisations, lots of buildings, that isn't an option now because modern buildings quite often will have some form of mechanical ventilation. But most of those mechanical ventilation systems can be run so that they're bringing in lots of fresh air and there's very little air being recirculated. And particularly, there's not air being recirculated from one floor to another, for example, or from one room to another, which is the way in which this can be spread quite effectively. There are ways of measuring that recirculation and controlling that recirculation in most of those systems, and it's important that the people who are in charge of it, the engineers in charge of it, know about it, have taken precautions to make sure there's lots of fresh air getting in there. As I said in the presentation, there are some specific circumstances where you don't have the luxury of being able to bring in that much fresh air at once. And in those particular places, you do have to look at purification systems, filters called HEPA filters, which are very, very powerful filters that trap lots of small particles when the air's passed through them, or they pass the air through a box that shines ultraviolet light onto it, and that sterilizes, kills off all the bugs as well. There are things that can be done to make the air cleaner for people to breathe if they need to go down that route. But it is all technical. Have a look at the SIBSE stuff as a starting point, and ask the questions of the management. They should still be trying to explain it to you and make it understandable to you if they think there is an issue with ventilation.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Doug. I appreciate it's a very technical area. Apologies, but your advice is really helpful in that getting the employer to explain it in an understandable way that isn't overly technical and doesn't kind of try and pull the wool over people's eyes. Okay, Chris, we've had a question actually that was emailed in advance to us. We know that many people across different sectors have been working at home some for a whole year, some for parts of the year. Have you got any advice for organising tactics when people are in that situation? So they are perhaps quite remote from each other, all in their own workplaces. Or kind of linked to that, we suspect that office work may have changed forever, and that there may be some people who will continue to work at home for part of the week, and some may be in the office. They might not all be together at the same time. So have you got any views on that and advice for people who might be reps in that situation?
Yeah, so basically, if you're, so if it's going to, if it looks like it's going to be long term, which obviously in certain areas it certainly does, then just applying the same model again, but just thinking ever so slightly differently, because, getting our heads set on the fact that obviously we're not physically with each other. If you were to take the roof off the workplace before the pandemic and think, whereabouts does everyone sit, or where does everyone work? Before it all happened and everyone started working from home in your company, then just think of it like that to start with, and map it as in the name of every worker, not every union member now, the name of every worker in those specific sections. So if you've got, I don't know, a group of workers who were in area A, and maybe they've got a separate, bargaining agreement with the company as well, then don't think of it like, you're going to take the whole workplace and try and get them all to join a union. Take those workers in area A first, get them mapped. Again, if it's got separate bargaining, discussions and everything else go on, then you need to treat them separately. But you need to get them mapped, and this is what we would do in Unite, and ensure then that we mark down who's the union members. And then when we start, then we've got to make sure we've got all their their details. So the members we will have the details for, because they've joined the union. Now, obviously, I say that with a take that with a pinch of salt, because obviously the last thing people do is let the union know when they've changed address, or if they've got a new phone and got a new number with it. However, you will have, you then can explore ways to get to them, to get a message to them. And obviously, in a lot of circumstances, you might be able to utilize the work emails to start with, just to say, it depends what your agreement looks like, discuss it with your officer if you're unsure. But I don't think, there shouldn't be any reason really as to why you can't just, send your members an email within work time with your facilities, and depending on what your facilities agreement looks like. But we get on with that to start with and spread the word. As soon as you get into those members, they will have the phone numbers, or the correct phone numbers, of their friends who you haven't got a phone number for. Those members. And then, of course, on top of that, not just mapping it out and speaking to the members, we identify the specific issue that affects Department A. And then we would stick out the again we'd make it might be the survey about it. It might be that it's a hot issue. We have to do something about it now. So we create like a petition. That could be a collective grievance. But you do all that online. Get them questions again. Write them down on a bit of paper. Give them to the person that's good at using the computers. They stick it into a survey format. And again, it might be a petition, but it's the same thing. That gets sent out on the text. You tell everyone you want it filled in quick, and you tell the reps to make sure that they can get to everyone to get it filled in, get it into the WhatsApp groups or Facebook groups. So the same thing applies, albeit you're doing it remotely. And of course, then we can utilize Zoom. We can utilize Microsoft Teams. You can get on a WhatsApp call, and I think you can get something like 7 or 8 people just even on a normal phone call, and you can add them to it. And you agree your time when you're meeting together, and that could be your shop stewards committee. Or in our case, our organising committee. So that's not just your shop stewards, your reps. That's each rep maybe getting someone that can assist them in their area, who's a leader, who can get the word out and make sure that we get those surveys filled in. Get them all onto a call. You say that we just want you on for 10 minutes. Let's go through what we're looking at. We know what the issue is. You've got 10 people in your section. You've got another 10 people in your section, and make your tasks short, sharp, and sweet, and deliverable. And then you can get everyone going out on a high to go and get that action happening. And you'll see movement. You'll see movement whether it's in a physical workplace or whether it's we're all remotely working.
Thanks so much for that, Chris. Again, some really great tips there. We've just had a question posted asking about how we get around GDPR issues when mapping. We did a webinar about this about a month ago, so do check that out. The webinar was all about GDPR and the union rep's role, so there's lots of tips in there about what you need to be aware of. Your individual union will have advice as well about handling members' data, etc. So we'll post a link to that. We seem to have lost Doug for a minute. I don't know if anyone else can see him, but I can't at the moment. Okay, we've sped through an hour and we've covered a huge amount. So maybe this is a good opportunity to actually to draw things to a close. If Doug rejoins us in a sec, we'll let him have a couple of final words. A few people have asked as well if we'll be sending out a recording to this webinar. Absolutely, we send out a recording to all of them. It will be available on YouTube, but we'll send an email out to everyone who's registered, either later today or tomorrow, along with any of the resources that we've mentioned. So before we go, Chris, any final words?
Just to say, if you all could please follow the, and someone's already posted it in the comments, so thanks for that, but the Go Ahead Northwest campaign against the fire and rehire. Please, everyone, follow it, spread the word on that. And we're currently we're fighting, hitting back in relation to what's happening up there. We're looking at about 500 workers in about 4 weeks facing the sack, and we're fighting, and we're taking urgent action on that. Sharon Graham, our executive officer, has been asked to step in, and so that's happening. It's live as I speak, and then also our action on Amazon campaign has started as well. Type that in to Google, to web browser, and you'll see about that as well. And just thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Chris. I believe Doug is still watching. We just sort of lost his picture, but thanks so much to Doug and to Chris, and of course to Sarah, who was with us at the beginning of the webinar. We've heard some fantastic advice, experiences, and tips today. You've been a great audience. You've really made it lively. So thank you again for joining us. We'll be back soon for our next webinar, which I believe is in the first week of May, about sexual harassment in the workplace and things that workplace reps can do to tackle that. So do tune in again for that. See you all again soon, and bye-bye for now.